All right, welcome to the Erie Music History Podcast. I'm Chip Shell, your host, and I would say over the course of doing about 45 of these episodes, I've never had someone provide me with an Excel spreadsheet of all their bands, the members in those bands, the places that those bands played. So Bob Tome, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for saving me so much time doing research on you.
Well, it's okay. I've done research on me.
And you were just telling me you're in Georgia now. We're doing this over Zoom. How long have you been down there?
You know, I've been in Georgia since about 2003.
Before that?
Yeah, and before that, I lived in Florida from 84 roughly to 2003.
Got it. Well, you're one of those guys that has been mentioned numerous times on the podcast already. You've played in a lot of the bands that people have mentioned, everything from Ma Brown, Chaser, Clockwise, Wave, ATV. Kevin Bensick obviously connected us, but your name's been mentioned in the Paula Holmes episode, the Angelo Natali episode, and like I said, those bands, if anybody is familiar with Erie rock and roll, those bands are going to be very recognizable. You played in a lot of very popular bands for the 17 years. Am I correct in saying you started in 1966?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I mean, I started playing guitar in I want to say fourth or fifth grade.
Yeah, you sent me that.
So I've taken
young.
Yeah, so I was taking lessons, and so by the time the Beatles came out, I had been playing for a while.
Were any of your other friends playing? I mean, that picture is classic of you. I mean, you must have been 8 or 9. It looks like. I don't know how old were you?
I think that was fifth grade.
Okay.
If I had a music master, and so that would have been fifth grade. And I had that by that point. I had that guitar a couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah.
You did take lessons?
Yeah, I took lessons with Max Hilbert at the Parade Street Osikis.
Ah, okay. I've heard that name before.
Yeah. And then we moved, and I went to the West Erie Plaza, and started taking lessons at Osikis there. And I believe his name, I have trouble with his last name, Bob Lasky.
Okay. All right.
Or Bob Laskowski. I can never remember his last name. But he was a big jazz guy who was playing with Chuck Ventrilo and all those guys for years. And he's passed away now, I think. But I took with him, and then I got to a certain point, and he said, we're going to send you on to this other guy, Dom Pizzuti.
Mm-hmm.
And Dom was my second to last teacher I had.
Okay. And so at this point, when you said you moved, did you move to Mill Creek or West Side?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Well, I lived in the Kearsarge area.
Oh, okay.
And then we moved over to the Westminster area.
Yeah. And you went to Westminster Middle School or something? Is that right?
Well, it was junior high school.
Junior high school. Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's what they called it back in the day.
Right. And, at that age, were any of your peers playing guitar, or were you the lone musician?
No. Well, by the time we moved over to Mill Creek, I had a friend named Kim Freeze, and he was a year older than me and lived a couple blocks away, and we had the same guitar teacher. And we'd run into each other, and then we saw each other at school, and then so we started practicing together. And so in that picture with the Canon, he's the other guitar player.
Okay, yeah. And that picture, I'll point out, you sent it to me. It's in Perry Square, I think where you guys are.
That's right.
On the Cannons, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry?
You're sitting on the Cannon, right? On the top?
Yeah.
And that's the Commodores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had the name first, and we never sued Lionel Richie, but,
Well, yeah, I was going to say, do you remember the genesis of that name? Like, I mean, as 8th graders or whatever you were, like, that must have been a big, topic of debate.
I'm sure it was, but I don't really remember. I think we were just settling on anything,
And you said Kim Freeze and you on your spreadsheet here, you have Perkins Church 1966. Was that your first gig ever?
Yeah, yeah. They had like, Friday night get-togethers for the kids, and I guess I was sixth grade, seventh grade, and so Kim and I had just learned Venture's song.
Wow.
And so that was what we played. And then later on, we found a drummer that lived 2 doors up from Kim, and then we got a bass player named Doug Henry.
Okay. So
and then Maggioroni came in. He lived across the street from Kim, and he played organ.
So you were just mentioning John Maggioroni in our previous conversation there. You got Doug is playing bass. Is that right?
Yeah.
Doug
was the angriest child you ever met.
Why so?
Well, families are all different, and they all have a way of intercommunicating. Some families are quiet, and some families are really loud and verbal, and really they just yell at each other. That's how they communicate, and that works for them. And Doug was of that group of people.
Got it. So what?
I remember.
Oh, go ahead.
Whenever I see that skit of Will Ferrell and Wedding Crashers, and he's telling his mom to get him a sandwich.
Yeah.
That's what I always think of Doug Henry, because he would just yell at his mom all the
time. Back then, you have listed on this sheet, which is super helpful again, Westminster Dance, the Westminster Talent Show. And then you have Mike Redcliffe, Camp Sequoia. What's that all about?
Oh, okay. Well, when we played at the variety show, we were in 7th grade, right? And it was just me and Kim and a drummer named Jack Wilder, who was a really good drummer. And he was years ahead of us on guitar, and his father was the head of the Boy Scouts in the Erie County.
Okay.
So anyway, there's the 3 of us, right? And we play at an event that Chris Moore mentioned in his show, in his episode, which was the Westminster Junior High School Talent Show. And he played guitar, and there was 2 girls with him, and they did like Peter, Paul, and Mary songs and did harmony and that sort of thing.
Sure.
And then we went on right after them, and we didn't have a bass or nothing. We just had me and Kim and Jack, and we played like Wipeout and Perfadia and Pipeline, and
so no
nobody sang. No.
Right. Got it.
No.
Okay.
But anyway, so we weren't really very good. It's surprising to say, but we weren't very good. And and anyway, so I didn't even know who he was, but this guy came up to us and he gave us this big pep talk when we were done after the show. And it turns out it was Mike Redcliffe.
Wow.
And he was like a sophomore,
okay.
I think, because I think he's about 4 or 5 years older than me. And he gave us this big pep talk, and it was like really encouraging. So anyway, and then after that, he knew me and recognized me and said hi to me and stuff. So I felt quite cool older.
Yeah. So the Commodores, you last for a year or 2, according to your sheet here.
I think I was in 9th grade when, I went on to do something else.
Okay. And was that something else, group therapy?
Yeah. I had met this guy in the neighborhood named Dick Shaner, and I've been practicing. And by that time, I was in 9th grade. I had gotten actually good grades,
Okay.
And my family was so shocked that my dad took me down to Osiki's and he bought me a Stratocaster.
Oh, wow.
And I already had a Vibrolux.
Right. Nice. All right.
Yeah. So I had a Strat and a Vibrolux, and it was about this time that Hendrix Experience had come out, and the neighbor Dick Shaner, he had said he had seen me, in the neighborhood, because we practice in our garages and that sort of thing, irritate the neighbors and all that. And So I'm walking down the street, probably on my way home from Kim's or something, and Dick Shaner comes up to me and goes, "Hey, you got to come over and listen to something right now." And I said, well, "Okay." And it was Hendrix Experience, that the first Hendrix album.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Holy crap," And so I started messing around learning that stuff, right? And maybe because you're young, you're not intimidated,
Sure.
So I
Right.
mean, I was able to, nail some of it. And I had this cousin named Denny Cray, and he had come home from Vietnam, and he was playing drums and in a band, and he happened to come over for some family event or something. I was in the basement messing around with my guitar, and he goes, "I got some guys you should meet." And I said, "Okay." And so he took me over to a guy named Bill Madera's house, and Bill Madera was the keyboard player in their band, and Bob Seaman was the bass player.
Okay.
And Denny was the drummer, and John Puzar played guitar in it, and Dan Snow was the singer.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're familiar with Dan, but his brother is Tony Snow.
Sure. The doctor. Right.
Yeah, and Tony was a really good tenor, like a good soul tenor.
Okay.
And Dan was a really good soul baritone. And so that was that band, and so I started playing with those guys.
With that type of singer, what type of music are you doing?
We did like Four Tops, and we did like Expressway to Your Heart and Doors, and he could sing Hendrix really well.
Oh.
And so anything we could come up with that, and Dan singing. He did a really good Since I Fell for You. He did, I think we probably only knew about 30 songs altogether. I can't remember the whole list, but it was whatever was going on at the time.
Was that pretty much the same type of stuff that the Commodores were playing? I mean, you guys eventually
singing, right? Commodores, we finally started singing. We did like Kinks and Beatles and Herman's Hermits and that kind of stuff.
And you're a singer too, right? I mean, were you taking lead on some of these?
Yeah, some of them, yeah.
Okay. And speaking of lead, are you primarily a lead player or a rhythm in this situation?
I guess you would say I was playing lead more.
Okay.
Definitely when I was playing with Bob Seaman and Denny and those guys, I was the only guitar player. John kind of lost interest, I think, at that point. He was doing other stuff.
Right.
And
now
so
he's back playing Beatles.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. And he had some great guitars, though. He had a Rickenbacker 12-6, which was a Rickenbacker Electric 12 based on a 360 model that had a lever that muted out all the jangle strings, I call them. The octave strings that make it sound like a 12 string.
Yeah.
And and then it would be just a 6 string. And then he had an original, well, of course it was original then. He had a 62 Les Paul, which was the first year that they were the SG style.
One of the things, I know you're a big gear guy, and I've seen the pictures of even, just your guitars hanging on the wall. How many do you have now?
12.
12? Okay. All right. That's less than I thought.
That's not too bad.
No. And
Mm-hmm.
I love going through these old bands and everything, but even more so, I love hearing about the places that you played, and I love the fact that you included all these venues on this list. But I got to ask, the Richford Hotel Strip Club you're playing with Group Therapy, what's the deal with that?
Yeah, that was our first gig.
Wow.
All right, and bear in mind, I'm like just in 9th grade.
Yeah.
Okay. I've just arrived, and I'm a year younger than everyone in my grade.
Oh, God.
And because I'm born in November, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, so I think Bill Madera's family, I think they were the people who owned that building.
Okay.
You know, because I can't remember what they did, but they lived on Wolf Road, so you know they were doing pretty good.
Indeed. Yes.
You know. So anyway, we were out, and it was, you know, we were trying to find place to play, and so, you know, Bill says, "Hey, we got an audition," and you know, I didn't know what the Richford Hotel was, you know,
Right.
and I knew where it was, but I didn't know anything associated with it. I didn't even know there was a strip club in there. I didn't even know what a strip club was at that point. And so, anyway, we, you know, I told my parents, "Hey, I got an audition," you know, and Denny's going to pick me up. And my dad's like, "Whoa, hold on now, just a minute." And I thought he's going to put the kibosh on the whole thing, you know, because I still didn't know.
Yeah.
And so he goes, "Marion," speaking to my mom, he goes, "I think somebody should go with Bob and make sure he's okay in this," you know, meaning him.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So anyway, we set up and we start playing. And then while we're playing, I look over to the left and, I mean, I guess if you could call it a strip club, it was really like a lingerie club, I guess you would say.
Okay.
You know, yeah. But they were still like, A, girls that were scantily clad, and B, they were not girls you necessarily wanted to see scantily clad.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, it didn't scar me or nothing. I was okay, you know, but we ended up actually not playing there.
Oh.
Outside of that one night.
Oh, that's what I mean.
You know?
Like, yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And I think what happened was we just got other gigs. I don't think it was a big moral decision. I think it was just, we could play this here. And Denny Craig, I'm not sure if you know him. He was a big sound system salesperson.
Okay.
And distributor for like Pennsylvania and Ohio, and like he held, he had the distributorship and all the big high end professional gear.
Sure. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But he was a shrewd business guy, and he would get us gigs. I couldn't believe we would get paid. This is the truth. We played at a Penn State event, and we got like $1,200 or something.
Oh my God! In the '60s, that's crazy money.
I know. Yeah. I know. And then and we'd play a lot of weddings and stuff, and receptions and that sort of thing. And then let's see. After a little while, I think they would indulge me because I wanted to play at the places where people my age would be too.
Right.
And so they indulged me a little bit. And I think we played at St. John's, and I had seen Bob in December's Children play there when I was even before. And so we went there and we played one night. And I think the same night, Ange's band, The Other Half, was playing.
Okay.
And you heard Bob's description. He did it really well of hearing Ange do Sonny.
Yeah.
And
so we're talking about Angelo Natale, and we're talking about Bob Berger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And Bob Seaman.
Bob Seaman. Right. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So anyway, and Bob Seaman was, me and Denny was, you could tell he wanted to do something else, and he wanted to kind of get it out, I think. And so we heard Ange sing, and it was like, man, we got to get this guy. And Ange too is like, like there's a lot of different types of drummers that you can work with. Like, if you want super high energy, super solid, and super technical fills and everything, you want to go with Steve McConnell.
Sure.
Or you want to go with Joey Salarino.
Right.
But if you want a deep groove 4/4 funk that is just with a groove that has so much space and so much feel, you want Ange playing drums.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. And so
anyway, we got him.
So you guys play around. You played at the Sugar Bowl. That was one of the places you played.
That was one of those gigs they do to indulge me.
That's right. Yeah, it was like a
Yeah.
younger place, a younger people's place. You did high school dances, village,
Yeah.
played frat parties. You played at Yogi's over on Peninsula Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool
That was
place.
weird because, when we played at Yogi's, I could be in the room on the stage when I was playing.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as I got off stage, they sent me back in the kitchen.
Because you were so
I had to, yeah, because I was, severely underage, and so they would send me in the kitchen and hang around back there. But then I'd come out and on my way, to when we start playing again, and I'd see my like school teachers in the crowd, and I'll be like, "Hey, how you doing?" you know, and I remember it being surprised that because it wasn't the teachers you'd expect to be there.
Ah, okay.
And I remember one particular event, and I won't say his name, but he was the band leader at school,
Okay.
at Westlake, and then he moved on to be the same thing at McDowell,
Mm-hmm.
and he got pretty heavily into it that night.
Yeah.
And so then I was going to school still, so I come out and I'm walking down the hallway in school, and this is when the teachers chain smoked in the teacher's room.
Right.
And this fellow came out and opened the door, and the smoke just rolled out of the room, and he looked poor. He looked like he was not feeling well.
Like it had been a long night for him. Yes.
Yeah, it had. Yeah.
That's funny. And in the Commodores, you guys wore those spiffy outfits that all matched. Did group therapy have outfits or no?
We had, and I think Angela will attest to this, we had the Nehru jacket.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. We had the Nehru jackets, and we wore them consistently for a couple of years.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was fun, but we played a lot of places, in that band, and I was not a good boyfriend at that point in time. My girlfriend in high school was like, we don't ever do anything because you always,
You're playing.
yeah. And, we played Hullabaloo and other places,
I mean, you're playing places that the kids that you went to school with probably wished that they could go to in some instances.
Yeah. And, there was a side benefit of that. And what it was the fact that because alcohol was always so readily available,
Mm-hmm.
it had no meaning or anything like that for me.
Got it.
I did not, and, and I saw the behavior it generated, so, now I'm not saying I didn't make up for that later in life, because I did.
Sure. Right.
But it got me through all those dangerous years where, kids are getting in car wrecks and that sort of thing.
Right. Well, you go from group therapy to playing in Kelly's Cellar, which were you the original group Kelly's Cellar, or were you coming in late?
I came in, I guess you'd call it, I was a senior in high school.
Okay.
So, the original band had Cam and John Drum and Jeff Clare and Bobby Berger and Chris Sorsey.
Okay.
And Chris Sorsey went off to school in Boston. And so, I had known Bobby off and on over the years. And so, he said, hey, he knew I sang. So, I'm trying to remember how this happened exactly, but anyway, I ended up playing with them. And there was a farmhouse they had out in Avonia, in that area, and we just rehearsed out there.
Yeah.
And so it was fun, because they had a pretty good PA system, and John had the big Hammond organ, and Bobby was a good singer, and John Drum could sing backups, and Cam was a good guitar player, and I could hold my own. So we had, we had a pretty good little thing going there.
And Tune's a good drummer.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And you guys ended up playing like some of the more popular places in Chautauqua. You played Kelly's or Snug Harbor. You played at Kelly Hotel, I take it. Is that right?
I guess, yeah.
And Eagle Ridge. I mean, those were popular places back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah. We had fun. We did, I think we did the Paderewski Park thing a couple times, and, General McLean. We played a lot of high school dance events and Mount Carmel things. But the thing about Kelly Seller, and I didn't really know it at the time, but they had a really large draw.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there would be a lot of people that would show up for when they played. And I wasn't used to that.
Mm.
And so, I got, I remember getting pretty nervous one time. We played at Mount Carmel. I was like, what the hell?
Yeah. And you're still in high school at this point, right?
Yeah.
71.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And are those guys, is Toon and Bob Berger and Cam and those guys, are they older than you, younger, or about the same age?
No, they're Bobby is a year younger than me. Toon's a year younger than me.
Okay.
Cam was a year older. Me and John Drum same age as me.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you guys play around for a while, a year or two. And one of the things that you had on this list was the festival where the Spartan Inn property went up. What does that mean?
Yeah. There was a kind of a throw together festival this summer. This was summer after my first year. I went to CCAD. It's an art school in Columbus.
Oh, okay. That's what that
is. Yeah. And so I went there for a year, and I came back, and then me and Bobby Berger and Jeff and Jim Matlock and Dennis Williams. His Dennis family had the 3D.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Remember that?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Dennis is famous because he designed the bicentennial silver dollar in college.
Wow. Okay.
So the silver dollar with the moon and the Liberty Bell.
Yeah.
That was his design.
That's crazy. All right.
Yeah. Anyway, Dennis had a good, kind of a tenor type singing voice. He could do John Anderson music and, that sort of thing. And so we had a little throw together band for half the summer, and then me and Bobby and Toon had a band that was just the three of us, and we did a bunch of, played at Snugs and played at a couple of Paderewski gigs and that sort of thing. Yeah.
So you're playing with Bob Berger and those guys just for that summer. You said you're playing some of these crazy places, and you were going to tell me about the festival at the Spartan Inn property.
Oh yeah, that was kind of like a throw together event. The Sorcy family owned that property. Okay. And so I'm not sure who came up with the idea. I'm not so sure. I think it was more with the Sorcy's permission than instigation, and so anyway, somebody went out and there was this big field, and somebody went out and mowed it and hayed it or whatever. And so it was all clear. And so a bunch of guys like, Borgia Brothers and Ricky and Sammy and a bunch of other people got it in their head they're going to have a festival. And so, the big challenge was getting the sound system together. And so Anacrusis played, and they brought their PA, and then Piranha Dog brought their PA. There was the Heinrich Brothers.
Was there
Chris Heinrich
festival?
I don't think so.
No,
a lot of people came.
Yeah,
but it was just kind of a throw together, put flyers up at the beach kind of thing, and so there was Kelly Sellers. We had, Voice of the Theater Altec system, and then Anacrusis had an ARP system, and then Heinrich Brothers had a big JBL system. So we cobbled together a big PA, and then everybody played, and Tom Bean came and played, and he was a wild man in those days, and he played, huh?
This is 72, 1972?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And summer of 72.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And so anyway, it was a fun day, and it went on pretty late into the night, I remember. But, and I don't know, I don't think anyone made any money, but I remember it was an event, that's for sure.
So in 72, how old are you then? Have you graduated?
Yeah, I mean, I was started college when I was 17, so I turned 18. So I was 18 then.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And then we played the flood relief concert,
That I've heard of.
Yeah.
At Frontier Park.
And yeah. And so that kind of changed things a lot for me in a way, because I was there and we played, and me and Bobby and Jeff and Jeff Clare and Dennis and Jim Matlock, we played a set. And then about two bands after us, Glass Heart played.
Yeah.
And so they were all together, and so
people should know Glass Harp is Phil Kagi. They're from Youngstown, right?
Yeah. And John Safira and Dan Pecchio.
Yeah, they were like a big band back then, and kind of.
Oh yeah.
Would I call it prog rock, or how would you classify?
Yeah, you could call it that.
Yeah.
I mean, you played in like A minor and E minor and stuff.
Okay. Weird keys.
And
all right.
And Phil, Phil was a monster guitar player and always has been.
Right.
But at that point in time, and people are going to call up and go, bullshit, Bob, but like at that time, Phil was like 3 years ahead of me at skill level. All right.
Right.
I'm talking like 3 solid years of nothing but practice. So there's still a big distance between us. But there was a lot of his stuff I could do.
Yeah.
And so anyway, John had noticed me. John Safara had noticed me. And so we're all just kind of like, we're packing up our stuff and they're packing up their stuff. And so John and I got talking, and he goes, let me give you my number, and like maybe we can get together and jam. And people used to do that then. Musicians would just jam.
Sure. Yeah.
Nobody seems to do that anymore, but then you did.
Right.
And I said, yeah, sure. And I had cousins that lived in Warren, and that's actually where John lived. It was Warren, Ohio.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, about 2 weeks later, we got together, and it was fun. And Dan came, and Phil's guitar was, in the basement with all the gear and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't help it. I played Phil's guitar. Yeah. But anyway, and I had a red Lucille at the time, which is a really nice guitar. And so anyway, it went pretty good, and we nothing was said about any plans or anything. And then I did it the following weekend, and then John and Dan said, hey, we got to tell you, Phil's leaving the band.
Yeah.
And Phil hadn't been there,
Right.
I was hoping to jam with Phil, really,
right.
And so they said, what do you think? And I said, well, I can give it a shot, And so, so we figured, well, we'll give it a shot. And so the following week, they came and picked me up. And this was a dramatic moment for my family, because they pulled in and they had a sweet black 71 280 SE Mercedes. And for their band car, and Bobby and Jeff and Chris Sorcy all came over, and we all cried, and said byes and stuff, like I was going forever,
Yeah, right. Like you're heading off.
And and I figured, okay, I'm gonna marry beautiful willowy blonde. I'm gonna buy a Porsche. I'm gonna,
And at this point,
and
like,
then
I'm in the band, right?
Yeah, right.
You didn't realize you're basically doing a tryout to play in Glass Harp and replace Phil Kagi.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And so anyway, so it went good, and then I started freezing in some of the parts. And then, John said, you know what, we're not sure what's going to happen with Phil. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, okay, just let me know what happens. And so, Phil stayed with them for another, like, I want to say 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
And then they ended up going with a guy named Tim Burke, who was a great classical guitar player. Yeah. And they got a violin player.
Right.
And so they went that direction. But I had met all their management folks. I had met a fellow named Bill Abel and Chip Kiplinger,
Okay.
and another guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But anyway, I'd met those guys. And so Bill Abel calls me, and this is about like a month later, and I'm, figuring out if I'm going to go back to art school or whatever. And
where are you at this point? Are you in Youngstown?
Well, no, I'm in Erie.
Oh, you're in Erie. Okay. When you left with them in the Mercedes, you went off to practice. You didn't play gigs with them.
No.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. But I thought that's what was going to happen. I think they kind of did too. But then there was some vacillation on Phil's side. And so then you kind of put everything on a hiatus and it didn't really work out. But then I got a call from last art manager, Bill Abel, who I'd met. And he said, I got this guy I need you to get together with. And he's got a really good keyboard player. And the guy was named Jeff Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this is probably the most fun, interesting thing that happened to me musically was that, Jeff was a good songwriter. And I had probably 3 or 4 songs, and Jeff had like 30, and he was like a good, accomplished songwriter.
Yeah.
And Bill had taken him under his wing. And Bill had managed Glass Harp, and he had guided them through. He was an A&R guy with Chrysalis Records, actually.
Gotcha.
And he had guided them through the 3 albums that Louis Merenstein produced, 2 of them. And so me and Jeff practiced for about 3 months, and we're playing at different acoustic clubs, like an acoustic duo, right? And so, Bill Abel brings Louis Merenstein to town, and Louis Merenstein had just come off the heels of producing Van Morrison's Moondance album.
Oh, wow.
So he had 3 or 4 Grammys for that one, and for the one Astro something before that. And so we played for Louis Merenstein. And bear in mind, I'm still 18 years old, right?
Yeah.
And I don't have a clue how the music business works at all, and I'm thinking, okay, Louis Merenstein likes us. He tells a record company, I like these guys, you should sign them. They sign us. And then we're in,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm 18, right?
Right.
And well, the way it actually happens is you get really good. You don't really even need a record company, and the record company wants you, and then they hire Louis Merenstein. Is really how it works, And so anyway, so Louis is very nice to us and says, you guys sound really good. I think we could do a lot with you. Now, if you were to hire me, this is what we would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, well, okay. And so then, it went from that to, okay, you guys got to put a good band together. And then so we enlisted Ange and a couple other guys, Barry's brother who played bass, and Dave Street who played piano. And Dave Street, as a piano player, you probably have not heard of him, but he played in Erie for with me and and Paula and them. And I mean, he was like a couple years ahead of like John Novello and Jack Coleman. He was incredible, and and he had 2 things he could do. He could play piano and he could do math.
Okay.
and he went on, he taught pure math, like the Good Will Hunting type stuff.
Yeah.
He taught that at Cornell for his career.
Okay.
Yeah. He's still there.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So,
but anyway, so
becomes Ma Brown, right?
Yeah, and that band becomes Ma Brown, and we did a whole lot of openings for a lot of bands, and we played a lot in the Cleveland area. We barely survived, but we were self-supporting, and as far as we lived in a house, we had band practice, we had a Ford truck, a real truck with a cab and a box, and a good PA, but we played with a bunch of people, and there was this cycle of clubs that bands would use to play at to kind of get their legs under them before they went on a larger venue tour. And that string was the Ocambo Club in Toronto, and the Agora in Cleveland,
Mm-hmm.
and the Agora in Columbus, I think an Agora in Atlanta, and then a bar called the Draft House in the Akron area.
Okay.
And if you took Rainbow Gardens and made it into a bar, that would be like the Draft House.
Okay.
Because
Gotcha.
it was a roller rink type event place, but anyway, so we picked up on all these opening acts for either the Agora or the Draft House, because we were in that area. So that was fun.
So I mean, but you're talking about opening for like Peter Frampton, Captain Beefheart, Cactus, those types of bands, right?
Yeah. And the version of Cactus that was then out then was Rusty Day, Carmen Appice.
Mm-hmm.
I always say Appice, but I think it might be a piece.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it either. Yeah, great drummer.
Yeah, and Tim Bogart. Yeah, and
Great
Rusty Day.
Yeah,
That was, and Mike Panera. Mike Panera was with Blues Image before that.
Okay, yeah.
And he did the Ride Captain Ride guitar song.
Yeah, I love that song.
Yeah. So anyway, those guys, the Cactus guys, were really nice to us. Tim Buckley was kind of a jerk. Buzzy Linhart, he was really nice to us, and but his backup band was the Muscle Shoals Rhythm Section.
Oh, geez, wow!
And so to listen to those guys, I mean, like they were like progressive rock tight without even trying.
Yeah.
with just playing basic rhythm and blues, but they were like prog rock type, but they were just doing it.
Yeah.
Kind of in the vein of like Little Feat or something.
Oh, sure. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you guys opened for a bunch of people, and eventually Steve McConnell, who you mentioned earlier, he comes up and replaces Ange. Ange moves on to more Christian rock stuff, right?
Right.
And so does that change, the sound of Ma Brown having McConnell in the band? Because as you said, they're two totally different drummers.
Yeah. I mean, Steve lit a fire up our butt.
Yeah.
He really did. He kicked the band in the ass. And our music was going in that direction anyway.
And was it all you were playing?
No, we weren't. We probably did it. Probably did like 6 or 7 originals.
Okay.
And then everything else was either progressive rock or it was like the band.
Oh, okay.
Which is kind of a little different mix. But, Jeff Brown, he liked Loggins and Messina, and Dave Streeter, he loved the band.
Okay.
And so, we did a lot of that kind of material. And then we would just mix in enough top 40 in there to make it be acceptable.
Right.
We did enough top 40 to make everybody say, okay, we'll hire them.
Yeah.
But then the rest of the stuff we were doing for ourselves. And, probably there's this one gig, and I don't know if Steve mentioned it or not, but we played this gig in a town called English Center, Pennsylvania, which was halfway across the Pennsylvania state line, about 30 miles south of the New York line, in the middle of the mountain area there, and it was like the area like where they filmed The Deer Hunter.
Okay.
Very mountainous.
Yes.
And not a police person or law enforcement within 100 miles in any direction.
Okay.
And this place was like the club was called A Shot in the Dark. And it was the most miraculous place I ever played. It was like a big ski lodge that everybody had abandoned the idea of skiing a long time ago, and they just drew this crowd of really responsive, like hippie type people. It was by far the coolest place I ever played.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I mean, like the place was pretty well packed, and everybody in there was like, they were smoking pot right in the bar.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was unreal, And that was a fun place, and we stayed at a really cool lodge. And this family made us like sauerbraten and stuff. And the same family that owned it owned the lodge, and so they were German immigrants. And then,
Right.
so yeah. And the area up there, it was like so clean and cool. It was a miraculous place.
I thought you were going to go down a path of, with the police being so far away, something bad happened, but it sounds like this is one of, like you said, one of the most memorable gigs and a positive gig.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it really was.
Yeah, I always like to ask those questions about, what was your favorite place to play back in the day, or what was the worst gig you ever had and why, and I thought that's where you were going with this one, but no, it sounds like it was one of those places that you'd go back to today and play.
Yeah, I'll tell you one, I mean, there was a lot of decent clubs to play in Erie at that time.
Yeah.
They were small, but there were nice places. And this was in a later version of Mob Brown, where we had Streeter and Bob Seaman and Steve and myself and Paula.
Yeah.
And Mike Goodwin was in it too.
Right.
And we had been playing at the Cali Club.
Okay.
And so we played there about a year, and then we got cut loose. And we played, and this was my favorite place to play in Erie, even though it wasn't what you call really nice.
Yeah.
It was the Kelso Beach Hotel.
Oh, wow. I've heard of it.
And yeah, well, I'm sure it's not there anymore.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say, I don't think it's there.
You played downstairs, and, it was a small space, and it was a tight, and it was a tight room, but everybody was, you could only fit maybe 100 people in there.
Okay.
But it just had this, because, the beach was right there.
I was going to say, was the beach right there? I mean, it's literally down on the beach down in that area, which is really a small.
You were like 100 feet from the beach, if that.
All right.
Yeah. And if we were playing there, it'd be August, it'd be warm, it'd be humid. Yeah. And it felt like, I've never played in New Orleans. I've been there a bunch of times, but I've never played there. But I felt like when I was playing there, this must be what it's like to be in New Orleans.
That's cool. Yeah. You also played at places like Antlers and the Alternative and the Gaslight Lounge and Bethwick's. Those are common places that I hear all the time, but I don't hear the Kelso Beach Hotel or, that.
Well,
often.
It could be. I don't know if maybe I was the one who liked it. Yeah. But I just liked the crowd.
Yeah.
I liked the crowd, and I liked the fact that, the bass player was 8 feet away from you, and and we had to kind of play a little bit quieter.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. But I just like the vibe of it.
Yeah.
Because underneath it all, I'm white trash.
Got it. Okay. Well, that explains a lot. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, you had mentioned this version of Mob Round, it eventually evolves into Poe, which eventually evolves into Clockwise. And you also said, Paula Grack is in the band at this point. So this is your first foray into being in a band with a female singer. And that goes on for quite a number of years. I mean, you go on to play in a lot of bands with female singers like Chaser and Clockwise and Wave, etc. And even when she played in ATV. I mean, was that something that you enjoyed? Like, because they obviously bring a whole different type of music to the table when you have a female lead singer.
Oh yeah. When I was in Mob Brown in Cleveland, I'm like a handful of people have heard her do this, but I mean, you are aware of how good Paula is, right?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Well, she was coming up and visiting, once in a while, when I lived in Cleveland. And so we took a day when she wasn't there, and we learned Great Gig in the Sky by Pink Floyd. And so we say, hey, we got a surprise for you. Because she would sit in a little bit,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we didn't even tell her until she was on stage with us. And she, and so,
she took that.
I mean, we just started doing it.
Yeah.
And she freaking nailed it.
Really? Wow.
And we were playing in a place in West Side Cleveland, and they didn't know what to think,
Sure.
They were just blown away.
Right. Well, like I said in the beginning, there were about a 17-year period that you constantly were playing, and you played in about 10 different bands. This Ma Brown Ho conglomeration eventually does move more towards spiritual Jesus rock, I think is what they called it at the time. How did that come about for you? How did you get into, what it was termed Clockwise?
Well, it started out when they did a 45, and, I had known Ange since ninth grade. Okay. And I'd known Paula for a good while. And, they did a single before they did the Clockwise album. They did a single under Jonah called Happy to Be the Moon. I can't remember what the other side was.
Right.
And so they asked me to play on it, and so, I did. And so then I started doing some live stuff with them, and it just felt like home.
Yeah.
I guess is the only way I could say it. Just felt like, this is all right. I like this. And it was none of the, I can't think of any particular bad attributes about playing in secular band or, you could say, the drugs and alcohol. You could say that, but, I was kind of impervious to that. It was, but all I could say is at the time, it just felt like home, and so, that's what I wanted to do. And then, they were going to great lengths to make it available for us to work on the music.
Oh, okay. When they're recording Anthem for the Sun, you mean recording the album?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And writing it. And, there was like this group of people, that whole church that was supporting us in the sense of giving us place to practice, giving us, enabling us with equipment and, hey, do this, try this, it was such a supportive thing that I couldn't say no to that,
And so that's Paula, Ange, Mike Watson, Tom Stone, you. Scott come in later, or?
Yeah, I had left, and I think Paula had left, and then Scott and Gail Campbell came in.
Right. Okay. All right.
But this is where we met Al Perkins. Right.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. When I did not know who he was.
A producer.
Well, Al Perkins is a producer, but he was a pedal steel guitar player and a regular guitar player, and he was in Shiloh with Don Henley.
Yeah, right.
And J.D. Souther.
Yeah.
Right? That's the school he came from, playing with the guys from the Eagles. He really was like, if there's a royalty caste system in rock and roll, he was part of it,
Yeah.
So he was really patient with us. I was a guitar player, and I'll be honest, I was a hot dog. I wasn't temperamental or nothing, but, I wanted to do flashy licks and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he sat me down, and he goes, Bob, because I wasn't, I wasn't acting up or nothing, but I think you could tell my disappointment at some stuff that we were doing. And he said, Bob, great recordings are made by well-placed, well-performed, boring parts.
Great advice.
Yeah, it really was.
And so Al's telling you this while you guys are recording the Clockwise album. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that's great exposure for you. But you do eventually leave the band. Why?
Well, I didn't feel like I was sincere about it as I needed to be to do it.
From the spiritual side of things, or just in general?
Yeah. That's the short story.
Sure.
I just didn't, there's some parts of it that I didn't buy.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I could say I bought it all when I was not buying it all.
Yeah. So you go on and join that heathen Kevin Bensick and Chaser and do rock and roll, right?
Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah.
And you got another,
and and we did, we had, that was a good fun band for for a long time.
So that's Maggie Flanagan, your first experience with her, right?
Yeah, except when I was in high school, I taught guitar at Oshiki's with Tony and Vinny, and this little skinny girl would come in. I think she was probably maybe 12, 13 years old. It was Maggie Flanagan. She come in with her little Villa Maria Academy uniform on and a guitar that was as big as her, and she, come in, and she was Pat's student, so we always liked her and talked to her and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's where I originally met her. But yeah, and then she grew up, and then we and she was in. It started with Gail and Mike Goodwin and them,
right?
And so I got in that band, and we got down to doing some good prog rock and good rock and roll, and we had a good time.
This is Chaser, and so you're playing all the regular places. You're playing the Spartan Inn, the Winery, the Holiday Inn South. But then you went on the road a little bit.
Yeah, we had this one stretch where we just did like a week in at the New Jersey shore.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we made okay money, and we did it, and then we came back, but it wasn't like a touring band. I mean, we played in the, I guess you'd say, tri-state area, because I know we played up in Buffalo a couple times, and pretty sure we played maybe in Pittsburgh once or twice. By and large, we pretty much just stayed in Erie.
And throughout all these years, you had mentioned earlier it was the CCAD school. What is that school?
It's Columbus College of Art and Design.
Okay. Did you finish there, or what did you do?
No. I went there for a year, and then I took classes again for about a year.
Okay.
And then I kind of just started working. I worked with Kevin at Lakeshore doing artwork.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. I mean, were you working regular jobs throughout all this time period? So you worked at Lakeshore?
In starting about 75, I guess.
Okay.
76, I'd say 76. That's when I started working regular jobs.
Okay. And was it just at Lakeshore, or did you do other stuff?
No, I just worked at Lakeshore in Erie.
Okay, so Chaser goes on, and then eventually, how do you get into Wave? Because there were a lot of folks in and out of Wave over the year.
Yeah, well, Dickie was playing in Wave, right? Dickie Buckle.
Okay, I didn't even know that. Okay.
Yeah, Dickie Buckle played in Wave, and he was there for like 2 or 3 years, I think.
Okay.
And Chaser broke up. Maggie and Gail decided I wanted to move to Florida.
Right.
Which they did. And I can't remember where I saw Dickie, or if he called me, or if I saw him somewhere. But he goes, "Hey, you want a job?" I go, "Doing what?" He goes, "Well, I'm leaving. I'm leaving Wave." And I said, "Oh." I said, "Well, let me come and hear you." And so then me coming to hear him, it meant like what I did was I just brought my guitar and amp, and I played with Dickie, side by side.
Oh.
For like a week, maybe, I think 2 weeks.
At rehearsals?
No, like just playing, like live.
Oh, so you were at the gig?
I kind of learned the songs just on the fly.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that was a really fun band to be in.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, the Tysons obviously are the core of that band.
Yeah.
Was Tony Stefanelli playing bass then, or who was your bass player then?
Yeah, that was Tony.
Okay. All right. So it was during that period. All right. And Tracy Soggs?
Yeah. There was another drummer at first named Mike, and I can't remember his last name, but he was a good drummer.
Yeah.
Good, solid 4/4 guy, minimal fills. And then, but he, for some reason, he wanted to go to California too. Everyone was going to California, and I don't know why. And so then Tracy came in, and he started playing. He fit like a glove. I mean, it was like just such a blend that you didn't even notice.
Yeah.
And, that was the perfect time for me to be in Wave, because I say that because I'm not sure I really would have liked being in the earlier, more disco horn band type version of Wave.
We're talking 79 through 81 that you're in there. So, and they've been around for a while at that point.
Yeah. And they were more rock then.
By this time. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. I mean, Annie was doing like a lot of Benatar and Pretenders and a lot of top 40 stuff that was like peripheral, temporary top 40 type stuff.
Okay.
And Tim, he was great. I mean, Tim could sing Queen stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And Tommy Tyson, he did we did some stuff like by the Sherbs, some pretty off
Yeah, I love the
center
series.
type.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did. We did that, and we did a bunch of tubes music.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is
We did
different than what I would
at
expect.
least a good half of the Completion Backward album.
Really?
You
Wow.
know, yeah. So for me, that was the perfect time to be in Wave.
Yeah. And you're playing
Yeah.
what used to be, well, you're playing Matins, which eventually becomes the PI, the Jerome
Yeah.
Hotel, Elk Creek, Hilton. What's Biagio's? I know that name.
That was it was a restaurant on 26th after, farther out than Asbury.
Okay. All right. So you hang out in Wave for a while, and then again, Wave is a super popular band at the time, and you join ATV, another super popular band, and you stick with Kevin at this point. How does that come about?
Well, Rico, Pat Tallarico,
Yep.
he was leaving,
Okay.
and I was working 40 hours a week with Kevin side by side, right?
Right.
And he's like, you should, and I knew Keith. I went to high school with Keith.
Oh, you did?
And
Okay.
yeah, and we had never ever played together in a band or anything, but I knew he played guitar and he knew I played guitar, and I'd see him buy stuff from Markham's once in a while.
Right.
But so we knew each other and we knew each other's capabilities, and so Kevin said, well, Pat's leaving, he's going to Arizona. He goes, you want to come fill in? And I said, yeah, sure. Because I don't know, I get itchy feet after a while.
I guess so. Yeah, because I mean, you get to play in ATV when Maggie actually. So ATV starts out as a threesome, obviously, and then it goes to having 5 people in it at one point. And Joey Salarino joins, and Maggie joins, and near the end and everything. In '83, what is the deal with in? Well, no, actually, I'll get to that. So you're playing all the big places, Sherlock's, the Landmark, the Rook, all that stuff, and ATV. So what happens then? You leave Erie?
Well, when Keith decided he wanted to be in Friction, right? And they had a lot of common goals, and like you said, I had like 17 years in a row of doing all that, right? And I kind of was like, wouldn't it be nice to like do something else,
Mm-hmm.
And my sister had moved to Florida in Clearwater,
Okay.
right? And so, she goes, you ought to come down and, see what you can make of things down here. Seems like you can write your ticket, And so I said, well, let me give that a shot. So, I basically sold everything I owned, which wasn't all that much, kept my guitars and stuff, of course.
Right.
And just, hung at my sister's house for about, a month or two. And then I got a job working for the city of St. Petersburg. And then, everything kind of just after that happened. But, I still practiced and played guitar and stuff here and there, but I didn't really do it professionally because I had a marriage and children and all that stuff.
Sure. Right.
And so I kind of like just set it aside. I mean, I could still play and everything, but I just didn't really want to be up late at night and all that,
Right.
And then I got back into it. I ended up getting divorced, and I had my kids a good part of the time, and so I just really needed some extra money, and so I started playing classical guitar at coffee shops, in the Daytona area. And, I mean, this is going to sound like a terrible parent because my kids were like 8 and 9 years old, but, there'd be some nights where the sitter wouldn't show and I would take them with me.
Gotcha.
And they'd be sitting in, and these were like places that, I mean, I'd be done by 10 anyway.
Yeah.
So it wasn't super late, but, and they were not like primarily alcohol. They were more like coffee and
Sure.
have sort of intelligent conversation, pretend you're from Europe or some type places, and
so you're
and I was happy with that. It was okay, and it helped for a while. And I did, and I did that, and then after about 2 years of that, then my day job kind of like took over my life.
Okay. And tell me about playing with Al Green. Is that the Al Green that you played with in Rehoboth?
Yeah, that was okay. So I moved to Atlanta, right?
Okay.
It's a great story for me anyway. And Al Green would visit. He would be like a guest pastor at churches, right?
Wow.
And they'd be all kinds of churches. And this was, my kids were little. I figured I better take them to church, because they were with me like during the summers and stuff. And so took them up there. And so, they had a church band. And so I thought, well, I'll play in that, so I got my guitar. I went in and I said, hey, can I play with you guys? And they said, yeah, sure. And so, and we just did the normal service stuff. And, these guys all read music and I'm not big. I can sort of read, but not really.
Yeah.
And so, then they had this service and Al Green came to be like the guest preacher. And I was surprised because this was like as Caucasian as the day is long, Southern Baptist church.
Yeah.
Right. But Al Green was a guest pastor. And of course he did some music too. And so it was like during what was normally Sunday school, they had us get together and he brought his own piano player. And so this whole orchestra, it's like horns and a bass player and a keyboard player and that kind of stuff, like a basic rhythm section, like a church would have.
Sure.
And so the piano player stands up, and I can't remember what song it was, but it was in the vein of like People Get Ready type stuff, Okay. And so he walks around everybody's music stand, and he drops charts in front of me.
Oh, no.
Now, I can read charts all day long, but none of my co-conspirators could. The piano player was working with everybody, explaining what they were doing. And so, we're just playing and practicing, right? And so we go through it once. It was just one song, so we go through it another time. And he goes through it a third time, and the piano player points to me, and he goes, can you fill it in a little bit here and there? And I was like, well, you don't have to ask me twice, And so there's these, I don't know what you call them. I call them soul fills.
Okay.
I messed around with stuff like that in between. And, the guy, he goes, yeah, that'll work. Okay. So then the service comes, and Al Green is like, I want to tell you, he's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he comes out and he starts singing. He comes to, the part where I start doing those fills. I didn't really step on it. I just kind of interjected them as little as it could. But he looks over at me, smiles, and gives me a thumbs up.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So I did the right soul stuff.
Absolutely.
For Al Green.
Well, that's got to be a highlight for you too. So that's
Oh,
great.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you filling us in, to use your fill analogy on everything that you've done over the years. Like I said, you kind of filled in some more of the details of other bands that people have mentioned over the years, and I appreciate it. This was a great trip down memory lane, and I hope we covered everything for you. Are you retired now or no?
No, I'm still working. I don't know what I would do with myself if I retired, to be honest.
How old are you?
I am 69 years old.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Well, you still got plenty of time to make some more music. And do you ever come back to Erie to visit?
I came back in 2008. Patrick Deck had a pub called Patrick's, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I played there. It was kind of like a reunion thing, a reunion for, really just me, but I got to see everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever
that
come
was
back,
that was a good time.
Yeah, that'd be great to meet you in person. And I appreciate you talking with me today and telling us all about some of the great bands that you were in.
Well, it was fun. It was fun doing it, fun talking about it.
Well, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, and special thanks to the JPT Foundation for sponsoring the podcast and for letting us use their events hall once a month for our free music night featuring the Fabulous Leftovers. They're a band of longtime Erie musicians who play for an hour and then are followed by 2 hours of an open mic. All the proceeds for the event go to the Second Harvest Food Bank. The music nights are held the first Tuesday of the month from 6 to 9 at the Events Hall, which is located on West 38th Street in the plaza right next to Our Lady of Peace Church. And finally, for information on what bands and musicians are playing in Erie and the surrounding area, please check out Jack Stevenson's Two-Man Happy Hour podcast and webpage. Jack gives you all the details you need each week on who is playing where. That's Two-Man Happy Hour podcast. So I'm Chip Shell, and I thank you again for listening to the Erie Music History Podcast.